going on, everybody? It's your boy Mike Robinson, and this is another episode of Let's Take a Walk. I hope everybody had an awesome week. I had a pretty awesome week myself. Tonight we have an awesome guest, a great guest. As usual, she's an author. She is a director. She loves God. God loves her. You name it, she does it. um, Her name is Savannah Cuvelier, and we're gonna sit down and talk to her about being an author and just being an all-around entrepreneur in the kingdom. For those of you who may not be familiar with her movement, I'm going to give her the floor to kind of reintroduce herself and give a little background on everything she has going on.
Sure, yeah. So you call me Savannah. My last name's a little bit hard to say. Um, but I am an author. I have published a book and a devotional. I also blog, and I'm the director of Full Circle Co., which is right now we are a small business. We're selling merchandise, but we have a really big vision for the kingdom. Our motto is connecting the dots of the kingdom one person at a time. So our intention is just to be a space where we are using kingdom resources for kingdom purpose and connecting people as we go. It's based off of the vision of the early church in Acts and having all things in common, but in a 21st century world. Um, a little bit about my books. I wrote one book, Speak Freedom. That one is about spiritual warfare. It covers really what it means to be in spiritual warfare and what you can do personally to prepare yourself for that. So it's Speak Freedom, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of spiritual warfare. And then my devotional is called To Be Loved. And it's 30 reflections on what it means to be loved by God. It actually is really personal because it started as just my personal reflections as God was teaching me about being loved by Him and what that really means. And then it developed into a devotional that I published earlier this year. So that's kind of like me in a nutshell, I guess.
That was very, very awesome. Um, when did the inspiration come to even write a book? Was this always in the plan, or was this a new thing that God kind of did on the fly?
Um, a little bit of both, honestly. So I've always had a gift for writing. It's always come really naturally to me. I mean, I was 8 years old and writing papers that went on for days. I was homeschooled. So, at 8 years old, my mom would be like, write a book report, which was, a couple paragraphs, and I'd turn in a 4-page paper. So I've always been a writer, but I never thought that I would write a book. And then when I was 14 years old, I was sitting in a writing workshop for one of my favorite fiction authors, and I apologize for the bell in the background. It's my cat. But so I was sitting in this writing workshop, and just as she was kind of explaining her process as a fiction author, God just dropped on me, you're going to do this one day. You're going to write a book. And neither of my books are fiction, but he said, you're going to write a book. And that was, yeah. So I was 14 and I just kind of put it on the back burner. I was like, I'll do this, maybe in retirement, not something that I saw being anytime in the near future. Then 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when I was 18, I was doing a ministry internship. And while I was there, God just said, start writing. This is your book. Start writing. And I didn't have a theme. I didn't have a topic. I didn't have an outline. I was just writing what came to me as it came to me. And then I put it down after my internship for about 8 months. And the following almost a year to the date from when I started my internship, God said, pick it back up. And that's when he gave me the outline for Speak Freedom. That's when he put all of the pieces together. I actually ended up making some major life changes. Like I changed my job around so that I was working super part-time. I actually dropped out of school to write the book. It was a very urgent thing. Like you're going to do this and you're going to do this right now. So that was when I wrote Speak Freedom. I started really writing it in May of 2019 and had it published by November. I self-published both of my books. So that was that one. And then January of 2020, I was just writing reflections. My word for 2020 was love and what it means to be loved by God. And so I was just writing like what God was teaching me as I was going through the year, and it just turned into To Be Loved. So yeah, I mean, both of them, they were very unexpected. Like, I knew that I was going to write something. I knew that I was going to end up publishing a book one day. I did not see it being any time now, but those two just came back to back. I know I will be writing another book. I don't know when it will be. I think that one is probably a few years off, but I thought the other two were going to be decades off, and we see where that got me. So,
So what has completing those two works? What have they done for you personally?
oh wow, that's a really good question. So, Speak Freedom really was a very healing thing for me to write. Coming out of the internship that I was in, there was a lot that God did in that internship to reveal places in me that were very broken, and to reveal parts of warfare that I had not engaged in, to reveal things that I needed to deal with to engage in warfare, and just really brought to light in me a lot of, I've always been one to engage in spiritual warfare. I'm not afraid of that topic. I've had really spiritual experiences from a super young age. I've had encounters with the demonic, and that scares some people, but that's a real thing. And so I've never been afraid of that topic. At a very young age, I was not afraid of that topic, but it's something that churches shy away from. And what I realized during my internship is that God had given me a perspective of the spiritual realm from an early age for a reason, for me to have those conversations, but He had to edify that. So writing Speak Freedom was a very edifying process. Like, I actually learned more writing Speak Freedom than probably anyone who reads it will, to be honest. I think I really, writing that one was not just for the purpose of teaching other people, but was really to teach me. So that one was a very, very growth inducing experience. It was very healing coming out of my internship and having written part of it while I was on the internship to then come out of it and a year later be reflecting on those things and seeing what God had done. That one was just it was a very reflective work. Like, I don't know what other word to use for it. It was just very reflective and very growth inducing. Taught me a lot. Like, I think one of that those few months was a season where I really heard from God and had God write through me in a way that I hadn't previously. I had a blog for years when I was in high school, and most of those were written by the Holy Spirit. So I knew what it was to have the Holy Spirit use my hands, but to have Him do it in Speak Freedom was a surreal experience, really, especially with the topic. It was a surreal experience. For To Be Loved, that one I think had more, because that was like what God was teaching me. Speak Freedom was reflecting on what God had taught me. To Be Loved was what God was teaching me as He was teaching it to me. So those things, it was also, To Be Loved is a poetic devotional book, and I am not one to share my poetry. That's something that I keep really close to my heart. But publishing that one, I think when I got to the point of publishing it, I published it on Valentine's Day of this past year, which just felt really fitting. And just it got to like the publication. I do have a God story, which I'll come back to that. But when it got to the actual publication of it and doing the final editing steps, I was just overwhelmed by how personal the work was. The reflections that were of my heart on the love of God and His love for me, the way that His love shows up, what it means to be loved by Him. And I think being loved is something that all of us really struggle with, especially when we've been hurt, which, if you're alive, I think you've been hurt. So when you've experienced pain, rejection, any of those things, it's just really hard to let yourself be loved by anybody because you are afraid of the letdown that's going to inevitably come. And To Be Loved was all about the fact that God is perfect love. And what does it mean? The very opening question that God gave me was, if God is love, then what does it mean to be loved by the definition of God? Because God is not love like, oh, God fits into what love is. Love defines who God is. So if we look at First Corinthians and we look at First Corinthians love, that is the heart of God. That's the character of God. So what does it actually mean to be loved like that perfectly? And that's a love that we all crave, that most of us end up rejecting throughout our lives because we are too afraid of what we know as love, which is imperfect and fallible human love, to receive the perfect love of God. So that one was just super personal because it had to do with me learning what it means to be loved by God, me allowing myself to be seen in the presence of God, and putting my walls down enough, letting go of my fear enough to receive the perfect love of God. Um, so that one was just really personal. I don't know that that one had as much to do with me growing as it did with me just being a child of God, being in his presence. So that one was super personal. Both of them, I think, anytime you talk to an author, our writing is our baby. It is super personal to us, no matter what it is. But I think every work has a different purpose and affects us in a different way. So those two specifically, just they were personal in very different ways. I think Speak Freedom was personal because of how it made me grow, and To Be Loved was personal because of how it made me be. I think that's the best way to describe it, I guess.
Wow. In the physical process of writing. Okay, so we know that but just inherently you wrote, as a child coming up to the point. But now we're talking about creating actual literary works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, was there anything within the physical process of creating the book that you found that you enjoyed that you weren't expecting to enjoy? And what I mean by that is sometimes, like when I started doing music, um, I could write the songs, but I couldn't produce music. I wasn't a musician or anything like that. But over time I learned. I got different software, and I learned how to create it. And I found that I actually enjoy producing music. You know what I mean? So that was something that I didn't expect in the process. Was there anything in your physical process creating the book that you found out you were good at and that you enjoyed that you weren't expecting to enjoy and be good at?
Um, so my process is really unique. I'm just gonna start with that. My process is super unique. When I say that my writing is done by God, it is literally done by God. So when I pick up something, I write something, and then I go to look at it the next day, and I don't remember what I wrote by any stretch of the imagination. So something that was actually really enjoyable for me, not because I knew that I was going to enjoy every step of the process. Just especially because I self-published, so I had a lot more control over the work than I would
Right,
have if I had gone to a publisher.
right,
But so I knew that I was going to enjoy the process just because everything about it, the writing, the editing, creating, I'm a creator at heart. So coming up with the design for my covers, all of those things. The one thing about it that I really didn't like was having to write my own bio. I don't like doing that. I don't like talking about myself that way. So that was the only part that I definitely did not like. But I think the one thing, it wasn't a surprise to me that I liked it, but it was a surprise to me why I liked it, was actually the editing process, because I didn't remember what I was writing. And every proofread, it was like reading it for the first time, because I when it's written by the Holy Spirit, for me at least, when it's written by the Holy Spirit, to this day, I can tell you the brief outline of what's in Speak Freedom, but unless God brings it to mind, I can't tell you, oh, I can't quote it. I can't give you a line from it. I just can't. Because it's really not my work, it's God's. And so editing it was really fun for me because every time I sat down to edit, every time that I moved things around, it was like reading it for the first time. And so I would read it and I would be like, "Oh, that's a really good line. Jesus, you know what you were doing with that. That's good. That's good. I'm gonna have to use
right,
that." Like
right.
that was my interaction every time that I read it. And the same was true for To Be Loved. And To Be Loved's process was really interesting because God gave me February 14th, 2021. That was when I was supposed to have it published. And I had most of it done. I think November of last year, I had 10 entries of 30 left to write, but I still had like 2 months of time. And then December and January were really, really hard months. I lost a close friend, just a lot was going on personally. And I had some of the worst writer's block that I've ever had. So it got to February 1st, and I still had 10 entries to write and 14 days to do it, and had not done any of the editing because everything was out of order. I didn't know what order I was going to put things in. So none of the editing had been done. I had 10 entries to write, and I had 14 days till the day that God gave me. So those 14 days were super chaotic, and I ended up writing like the last two entries literally 3 days before the 14th. So all of the editing got crammed together, and I was sitting on my bedroom floor with like cut up pieces of paper trying to order what the entries were going to be. And my mom would walk by my door and she'd be like, "Are you okay? Do you need some help?" Because it was just such a different process. Speak Freedom, God gave me the outline. I knew exactly what I was doing from the beginning. I didn't really know what I was going to write, but I knew the order. I knew what was going on. That was not the case for To Be Loved. Like, it was just all over the place and not chaotic, but creative. We're going to call it creative. um,
Okay.
and so then it got to that weekend, and the Saturday was the 13th. I submitted it. When my publishing service, you submit it, they just have to review to make sure that it matches their guidelines, and then it goes to production. And so I submitted it, and typically it takes 2 to 3 business days for it to be approved. This was a Saturday, so I just knew in my gut it wasn't going to be done the next day. It wasn't going to be published. And then I got an email that I had to change something. So then it's Sunday morning, and at this point, I had given up on it being done on the 14th. Um, but I resubmitted it, fixed the thing, and then at 11:30 p.m. that night, I got an email saying your work has been reviewed and is now available to purchase. And so it was published 30 minutes before the end of the 14th, but it was published.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so watching God just like show up in the process, I don't think there really wasn't anything that surprised me in what I liked or what I enjoyed about the actual writing or the editing or any of that. It was just watching him show up in the process in places that I didn't expect it. I mean, that was really what was unexpected, was the ways that he showed up, the ways that he showed up when I was editing, the ways that he showed up on the timeline. I mean, even Speak Freedom, he didn't give me as clear of a deadline, but I knew when I wanted it published. And kind of the same thing. I was right around, I had a few extra days, but it got approved right at a moment that fit within something else that he had said to me, and also within my timeline, but it was just super specific to a word that he had given me. And so just watching how he shows up in the process, I think that's what always, it shouldn't catch me off guard, but it does, because he shows up in places that I didn't expect to need him. I think that's really what it comes down to, is I expect him to show up, but there are certain areas where I don't expect to need him, and those are the places that he ends up showing up the greatest, because it's not about whether or not I need him, it's about whether or not I invite him into it. So that's, I think, in the actual writing process and the editing and the doing the work. It's just him showing up. That's what is always catching me off guard, I guess.
So you're looking, at a complete work. Um, do you? I guess I kind of already know the answer, but do you feel like, as you've watched it evolve and develop in the public space, you feel like either one of your books have leaned to a certain group of people? Do you find that more women gravitate to it? Do you find that more men gravitate to it? Do you find that more youthful people do? Older people? What do you have you did you find that in your process, that it starting that you see your project like kind of naturally, organically gravitating to one group or another?
Honestly, not really. Like, I get pretty consistent feedback from everybody. I do think To Be Loved has just generally been read by more women. But across the board, I mean, I get pretty consistent feedback from all different ages, backgrounds, everything. I don't know that my work really reflects a specific audience, but I will say I don't really focus on the audience. Marketing is not something I'm bad at, but it's just not something I focus on. I mean, I don't write for the purpose of having an audience or making money, which might sound weird, but I write because God tells me to. And the ears and eyes that it's supposed to fall on are the ears and eyes that it's going to fall on. So I actually couldn't tell you how many books I've sold. I don't look at the numbers. And that was a commitment that I made to myself early on, that I was not going to get caught up in the tangible success of something, because the only thing that actually matters to me is whether or not I was obedient. The success of it from
Right.
there falls in the hands of God. So I haven't really thought about really what type of audience am I reaching. Generally speaking, I do get more feedback from women just because I am one. Um, so most of the people that I'm in conversations with and that I talk about the book with, a lot of them tend to be girls. Um, but I have gotten feedback from a lot of different men about things that I've written as well. So it really falls across the line. I don't think there is a specific audience, and frankly, that's what I would desire. I don't want to be. I want my work to be something that can be heard by anybody at any time and be what God needs it to be. So,
Right. Um, Particularly in the space that we're in with, pandemic and, the racial stuff and the political stuff. Um, has it has it affected how you move around when we talk about some of your other philanthropic things, that full circle and all that. Has that affected you personally and has it affected how you move around and how you actually conduct business? Um, yeah, how you conduct business.
um, fair question. So, Full Circle is brand new. It's been a vision for something like 4 or 5 years now, but we didn't actually start as a business until January. Um, I think because the heart of Full Circle and my heart personally is for the kingdom to reflect God's heart and for us as believers to function the way that he intends for us to. um we're not serving any of man's kingdom. So when it comes to what we do, how we function, we're going to do it with integrity. We're going to make sure that we fall within the lines of authority that God has placed above us. But realistically, if we are actually meeting our vision, then we are leading in how people should respond. We are not having to shift to what we believe is the appropriate response, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that's totally what you're asking, but um, really our desire as a business, as visionaries for what we want um, the kingdom to represent and how we want to be a part of kingdom movement, we are of course sensitive to what's happening, but the heart of God is for the oppressed. It's for those who are suffering. It is for those who are in places of loss and need, which is ultimately all of humanity.
Mhm.
But God said, don't tell people that you hope that they hear from God and not give them food and put a coat on their back. Don't say that you believe and not follow it up with works. Faith without works is dead. We're not believing because we do stuff, but because we believe, we do stuff. And that's kind of
Okay.
really the whole heart of what we do and where we're at. And because we're brand new, like it's going to be years before we're really actually seeing the move of God the way that we see it in our heads and in our hearts. But laying a solid foundation, and something that's been a priority for me, a priority with our team, is laying a foundation that really does sit on our core principles of diversity, reconciliation, community, and inheritance. That's what we're driven by, is that we would represent the diversity of the kingdom, that we would have a heart for true reconciliation from man to God first and man to each other second. You cannot be reconciled to each other if you are not first reconciled to God, and leading in that by example. That is not something that you can shove down anybody's throat. That's not something that we have the right to shove down anybody's throat. It can only be done by representing Christ and representing the reconciliation that is brought at the cross. That's all we can do. And if we actually lead in that, that's where we see difference. So being a movement for reconciliation that literally begins with our team of leaders. If we're not reconciled to each other, if we're not operating in unanimous spirit-led unity, then how are we going to lead a ministry of reconciliation? Community is quite literally one of the most important parts of our ministry. what I love about the Acts 2 church and the original church is that they really functioned as a body. The concept of I'm a hand, you're a foot, you're an eye, I'm an ear was real in the way that they functioned and the way that they took care of each other. And I've had so many people be like, well, how are you going to do that? The church is global. How are you going to do something like that? First of all, it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit. And if we actually believe that that is the design of the church as given biblically, which I don't know how you can argue that it is in Acts, if that is what we believe the design of the church to be, then really wouldn't that mean that God is more with us than the way that we do things currently? Wouldn't that mean that we would see him greater in that space? And so being a community, being a body of believers where we actually have interpersonal relationship with each other, where we actually are tangibly meeting needs and actually seeing each other's needs, being present in spaces of pain, being present in spaces of heartbreak. Lamentations is one of the highest forms of worship. And if we cannot lament as a community, we can never rejoice as a community. So all of those pieces go together. And then that leads us into our heavenly inheritance. We are promised an inheritance at the foot of the cross for eternity. When we get to heaven, we get streets of gold, we get mansions, we are promised an eternal inheritance, but we have to live like the body here in order to actually experience what it means to be his bride there. If we're not willing to function as a body here, we don't get to be the bride. That's not how that works. And so that's really the heart of Full Circle, is to experience being the bride before we get to be the bride, you know? And I think if we are actually doing that in a biblically driven way, then whatever is happening politically, socioeconomically, whatever those things are, we'll beat it to the punch. You know, we'll be there before it's on mainstream. We'll be there as a community of believers, meeting needs, weeping with those who weep, rejoicing with those who rejoice. We'll be there first. You know, we'll be the ones making the news. That's really my heart and my prayer. That's the prayer of our team, is that we would show up in such a way that it reflects Christ like that, that we would not have to adjust to what's happening because we were doing it right to begin with. So yeah, I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, you pretty much did. What was I gonna say? um, when I speak to people who provide services such as like you and others, they all have, although their stories are diverse, the heart still seems to be the same. It really comes back to a heart of service, being a servant. Like it's not me entertaining. It's not me just giving you a literary work. It's not me doing spoken word or anything like that. It ultimately my goal is to serve. Um, with that being said, who who do you feel was your biggest influence? If you could attribute what you're doing now to someone being influential in your life, who would that be?
My mom and my grandfather, hands
Mm,
down. And I say that mostly because of the way that they have prayed for me my whole life. My grandfather went through so much before he really got right with God. And I was blessed to know him when he was close to Jesus. And I got to witness his walk for the first 16 years of my life before he passed. And actually, one of the most influential moments was a couple weeks before he passed away. I got to see him, and he didn't have dementia, but at that point he was slipping a little bit, so he would have moments of confusion. And one of those moments happened kind of in the middle of just watching a movie. And first reaction from me was to go pull out his Bible and start reading Psalm 91 over him. And as I read it to him, like watching him in his state of confusion, not really knowing where he was at, and he's hooked up to an oxygen machine and all of this stuff, and just watching him settle in the spirit and just calm down immediately, like his connection to God and his connection to the spirit, just getting to witness that in the first portion of my life was past influential. I think he epitomized what it means to be friends with Jesus. and to know he who is loved much forgives much. And my grandfather, like, I've never seen a man love the way that my grandfather loved. I've never seen him serve with the intentionality. I've never seen that from anyone else other than him. And watching my mom carry many of the same attributes, but also just within her personal walk with God. She is a cancer survivor, and the day that she went to have the tumor removed, she woke me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We had no idea if she would survive. And she woke me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was 9 years old, kissed me on my head and said, no matter what happens, God is good. And just that witness from both of them, the prayers that they prayed over me my whole life, watching their relationships with God and watching them in the fire. It wasn't, I didn't witness them just have the pretty relationship with Jesus. I witnessed them walk through fire with God and not deny him. I watched my mom go through Job seasons and still choose to praise his name. And so when it comes down to my heart and the way that I view the world, the desires that I have for what I produce, and the fruit that I want to see come out of my life, definitely my grandfather and my mom, those two most influential people in my life by far.
What would you say? What would you say is the most common misconception that people have about you?
That I'm a good Christian girl. That is the most common, which has been frustrating for me my whole life, because it does two things. One, it allows them to excuse their sin on the basis of what I have is superficial. I'm really young and I have a really close relationship with Jesus, and most people my age could not imagine having the relationship that I have with God. But the reality is, I accepted him in my heart when I was 5 years old. I don't know another 5 year old who has ever done that, but that was a real commitment for me at 5. So I've been walking this for 16 years and have been through a lot of life in the midst of that. So I carry a wisdom and a maturity beyond my years. And so there's just a lot. People like to compare themselves to me, and they like to use the good Christian girl as an excuse for them to not step up their game, honestly. And um, spirit testifies unto spirit. We walk walks that are convicting to those who are not doing it and know they should be. And um, so it's always been frustrating for me, because I'm like, if you sat down with me and had a conversation, you would see my sin in a heartbeat, because I'm not ashamed of the fact that I am every bit human. And I don't wear my sin like a badge. Obviously the goal and the desire is to be transformed day by day into the likeness of his image, but I'm a sinner. I'm human, and the most common misconception is just that I'm I'm just a typical church girl, and um, I'm not. And I really hate when people reference me as that. Like, couldn't be further from the truth. Like, what I have with Jesus is real. It didn't come from sitting in a church pew. And my deepest desire is that the people around me have it too. And it actually devastates me when people choose to walk away from a conversation because they decided to brush me off as that, versus actually having a conversation. Because if I can introduce them to Jesus, I mean, that's really my only heart's desire, is that they be introduced to Jesus. And um, there have been moments that I've gotten mad and I'm like, Jesus, am I doing something wrong that this is what people perceive me as? Because I don't want to be seen that way. I don't want to be seen as superficial. I don't want to be seen as too good or anything along those lines. I'm saved by grace. That's just the fact of the matter. I am saved by grace, and I'm walking alongside him to the best of my ability, which means that I fail literally every single day. That is the best of my ability. That is the reason why there's grace. And to just be able to have conversations with people. And there are some people who walk with me. I'm blessed to have a beautiful community of believers and some really, really close friends who see my messy every single day. And they're always like, Savannah, I love you so much. And I see Jesus in you all the time, but girl. And I'm like, yeah, correct. You're not wrong. So that accountability is beautiful for me. But it's devastating when I lose the opportunity to witness, or when people turn away from what God is doing in me and around me, because it's not just me. I've watched people walk away from the community that I have because they're uncomfortable with how real our relationships with Jesus are. So I think that is definitely the number one misconception and definitely a huge frustration for me, but not just a frustration, something that I lament because the enemy really uses that. He really uses that.
Um, I, I'm of the mindset that, especially nowadays, the more practical, the better. If I can be relatable, be as relatable as I can, not to the point where I'm being something that I'm not, or I'm trying to like go outside of whatever the will is for me to do at that time. I'm willing to do that, as far as being, like I said, being relatable to all those that I um, come into contact with. Um, it's tough, like what you're saying. It's tough because you have people who come from all different backgrounds, all different situations, and some people who have never seen the inside of a church,
Mhm.
much less heard anybody evangelize to them or speak to them in that manner. So it can be very, very tough, but it can also be tricky on your side as far as like I said, being trying to be as relatable and as down to earth as you
Yeah.
possibly can. So I think it's a lifetime process of finding balance within yourself to be able to minister and evangelize, and just not even that, not even putting spiritual terms on it, just to be able to speak with a person. It's a
Just to
lifetime
build
balance,
relationship.
right? Just to
Yeah.
be able to find that groove that you can be able to talk to people in a way that they don't say, oh man, what I mean, here comes this holy roller or whatever the case may be. But I absolutely can relate to what you're saying. um it's funny, I met Savannah actually as I was interviewing um another guest, Miss Nakia Marie, who has a song called "I Believe in Me" that is really doing well. She was on, as a matter of fact, she was on, I think, Erica Campbell today, right?
Yep. Hmm.
So congratulations to her. She, so graciously introduced us, and so here we are. And so I think that, there's something to be said about, kingdom connection and that whole thing. So, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to tell you in the midst of this interview again that I really appreciate, what you're doing. And I think that it's very important what you're doing because there are so many people out there, young people and older people too, who aspire to do what you're doing, but they don't have any examples. You know what I'm saying? There's nobody near them. There's nobody that they can tangibly see, and then here you come, and you're showing that it can be done. So I want you to know how important it is had to have you on and to you know kind of chop it up about everything that you have going on. And so that's what this platform is all about. um this is my last official question for you. This is a question that I ask all my guests. I just want you to think about it for a second and give me the best answer that you possibly can. Not the best answer, but the most transparent. And I know I don't have to tell you that because you have been nothing but transparent this whole time. But here goes. What would have to happen in your life if it hasn't happened already for you to consider your life a success? What does success translate or look like to you personally?
So I'm gonna answer this twofold. My immediate reaction is to walk into the gates of heaven and hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." That
Okay.
is the measure of success for me. But on a
Okay.
on a more
Absolutely.
practical level, um, really, I think just 30 years from now, towards the end of my life, if there was one person because for me it's all about one person. I learned early on he left the 99 for the one. It only matters one person at a time. Um, if there could be just one person, and I mean, I guess technically this has already happened a lot, but um, I think it would mean more to me at a later time in life um, to have one person just say, "I saw Jesus in you." That
Mm.
that would be that would be the measure of success for me. That to just have one person that they saw Jesus in me and that impacted the way that they walked. I mean, it's not worth it to me if it's not done for the sake of eternity. So if if people see Jesus, that is the measure of success. And that goes hand in hand with well done, my good and faithful servant. But on a practical level, just to have one person say, "I see Jesus in you," that would be it.
So, how can, first of all, those were magnificent answers, awesome answers. Um, how could somebody that has questions about, that may be wanting to write a book or create, something that you've created, and they have questions, how could they get in touch with you?
Um, the best starting place is my website, which is just my first and last name.com. So you just have to know how to spell my last name. But Savannah, like the city, Cuvelier, which is just Cavalier with a U instead of an A.com. All of the links to my social media are there. There's also like a contact form that you can fill out to send me an email. Probably DMing me on Instagram is probably the best way to reach me. But really, any of those forms, messaging me on Facebook, DMing me on Instagram, emailing me, any of them, I check all of them. So those would be the ways to get in touch with me. And I value personal relationships. So if you reach out to me, we're gonna have a real conversation. It's not gonna be oh, how you doing? Well, let me answer your questions. We're gonna have a real conversation. I value building relationship. I value actually being connected to real people in real life because we're all real humans. So yeah, the line is always open, but probably Instagram DM, but all of it is on my website and including links to Full Circle, our website are that's all on my personal website as well. So
Okay, well, you could be doing a gazillion things besides this. Um, I wish many, 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 many blessings on everything that you have going on, your movement, your books, Full Circle, the whole 9 yards, your ministry. Because I mean, listen, your answers are like mini messages. They were like mini messages. So I I know that there is a higher calling for
thank you.
you that's coming. So, and like Miss Lindora said, I love the energy. I mean, it's infectious. You can't help but smile. Um, you just have a kind of a brightness, a glow about you. So again, I wish you much blessings on everything that you have going on, and I look forward to having you on again in the near future. And if there's anything that you need or you want to promote, if you want to come back on and say, hey, we didn't touch on this, I'd like to touch on this a little bit more. Hey, let's do it. I'm always open. Um, and I thank you again, for coming on.
Thank you
Are
for
there
having me.
is there anything you want to leave with the public?
Um, Really, I appreciate everything that you shared with me. I especially appreciate you saying that there's a higher calling. That's something I wrestle with that some days because I never saw myself here. I wanted to be a stay-at-home homeschool mother. That was my life goal. But now we're here, and I still want to be a stay-at-home mom. But I have witnessed God move in me in ways that can only be Him because this is not me. Um, so thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for speaking over me. I really, those words of affirmation, I hold those dear. I really do. So thank you for that. If I could leave anything with the public, I know a lot of us are still wearing masks, but smile. Just like you said, my energy is contagious, but really seriously, Jesus finds joy in our joy. And so I smile because I know it makes him smile. And on the worst of days, Kirk Franklin has a song called I Smile. It's one of my all-time favorites because even on the worst days, like it to know that my father is smiling at me because I'm smiling at him. So um yeah, and just I am a fervent prayer warrior. So if anybody needs prayer, please don't just like DM me. I'll pray for everybody. I'll pray for the whole world. So if you need prayer, anything along those lines, like I my heart is just to serve in whatever way that I can and whatever that looks like. So like I said, it's an open line, and wherever God leads, thank you for this opportunity. I genuinely, leading up to this, I had been praying that God would open doors for me to speak more, for me to have more conversations with people. And then this happened, which was super random because I didn't know it was happening that night. And Nakia was like, "I'm gonna just pull you in, Savannah." I go, "Okay." So the way that God moves, this is the way that God moves. But yeah, thank you. It is an honor to be here. I really appreciate it, and we'll probably connect again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to it. I thank you again. You have an awesome weekend, and I'll absolutely be in touch, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye on everything that you have going on.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have an
You have
awesome
a
night.
great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So there you have it. Another episode of Let's Take a Walk. Um, I mean, what can I say? She was a ball of energy, a ball of information, a ball of joy. Um, and these are the ones that you really look forward to, because you can really feel the passion, you can really feel the love and the genuine enthusiasm, um, in everything that she's doing, and that's infectious. You know what I'm saying? That's empowering to everybody. Um, and I want to thank her for being on the show, and I want to thank everybody who saw fit to come on this Lindora. Thank you for, um, commenting and all the hearts and the likes and the love and all of that. And I really appreciate that. Um, and shout out to everybody who, saw it not robbery to come on the show and just check out what we're doing over here. Um, I got some news today, um, that my mom tested positive for COVID, and I wasn't gonna do the show today because I didn't feel like I was gonna be in the right space. So, but I understand that even in the midst of everything that's going on in my personal life, my family life, um, my purpose still has to go forward. God shows me every day. He shows me every time I sit down behind this on this platform that there's a higher purpose. There are people that are actually being blessed and actually being empowered and inspired by the guests that I have, um, on the show, on the platform. If you check out my flyers, you know what I'm saying? I don't even, my picture is so small because I really want to illuminate the guests that we have. I want to illuminate what they're doing, not necessarily the platform itself. Um, but I thank those who give me encouragement when I see you guys on the street and you tell me that you've seen stuff and you quote some of the stuff that some of my guests said. That really does my heart good. And I just wanted to tell you that, like I said, with my mom and everything, I was really broken up earlier today. But I understand that, purpose has to go forth. Um, I mean, I ask that you guys pray for her. She is still in the hospital. I'm in Virginia. She's in Florida. Um, it's and where she's at is locked down. Nobody in or out. So it's very very tough. But I want to tell you guys that I believe that she's gonna be she's gonna be all right. I believe that she is God's child and He loves her more than me. I don't want to try not to. I don't get emotional on here. But I know that He loves her more than me. But I ask that you guys, just pray for her healing, her peace, and God's will. Is our will. With that being said, I'm gonna sign off. Um, on a lighter note, my anniversary is next week, so we won't be on the show. So we're gonna kind of the guests that I had lined up, we're gonna push them back to the following week. Um, and that's that. So I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, like I said, pray. I solicit your prayers. Um, and if you have any family members that may be affected, I will pray. I pray that miracles and healing will take place. With that being said, I'm gonna sign off and